Hi, welcome to my podcast, Becoming a Cut Flower Grower. I'm your host, Lydia, and I'm here to share my year of growing and selling cut flowers. I'll be giving you the lowdown on everything I'm doing and sharing all the highs and lows, the good times and the inevitable disasters, all in real time. Join me on my cut flower journey, starting right now. Hello and welcome to the latest episode. It is Friday, the 7th of November, 2025, and you are joining me at home with a glass of raspberry and blackberry tea with echinacea in it. It's very nice too. Now, I've decided to make this week a bit of a theme, and the theme this week is mistakes because I have made some mistakes this week and some balls have been dropped. And it feels like 2 seconds actually since I was recording the last episode. So I hope you've had a good week. So one of the mistakes I made was that the cockerels the young boys, Lion and Moley, managed to get close enough to have a bit of an altercation. And they're now both a little bit battered and bruised. They didn't actually get in the same space. They had a bit of altercation between the fence panels and just made a bit of a mess of each other, and it's very, very irritating. And I've had to rename Moley Kung Fu Moley. That is his new name now. He's going to be called Moley. He's a very naughty boy. In fact, they're both very naughty boys. But that is also my fault. And luckily, nothing worse happened. And the other mistake I've made this week is listening to the news. And generally speaking, I avoid listening or watching to the news. And this week, for some reason, I just ended up getting a bit hooked on it. And it's a big mistake, big, huge mistake, because it's been unrelentingly negative this week around the whole world. And it shows absolutely no signs of improving. And I thought the link to the cut flowers really is that our Justice Department and our prison service would do well to ask a cut flower grower on how to work out dates when things will actually be ready so they don't let people out of prison too soon, or even a dahlia exhibitor because they're really hot on the number of days until something is actually ready. And there will be spreadsheets out there which will do all of the calculations for them instead of using little bits of paper. I mean, I wouldn't ask me to do the calculation because I haven't actually done any of those yet. But if you want something done, a cut flower grower is going to know how to do it. So, little tip there if anybody is listening from the Justice or the Prisons Department. So, as I said, tonight's theme is all about mistakes that I've made. But because I have made so many, I have decided to subdivide this topic into categories. And tonight's category is mistakes I've made as a direct result of coming into this cut flower growing from the background of being a gardener. So it used to be something that I did, and now it's more of a side hustle to support the cut flower business, which I am determined that it is the main priority. I don't even like the expression side hustle. In fact, I really hate it, but it just seemed like the most appropriate expression to use. So I was going to put these 10 mistakes into a fantastic top 10 chart and work back from 10 to 1. But I spent so long trying to work out which one was the most important or the least important and basically putting them in that order that I had a bit of a brain freeze. And I thought, you know what? I'll just do them in a random order. It really doesn't matter. I don't think one is any more particularly serious than the other. They're all just mistakes that I have realized that I have made because I have this gardening background. And you may, depending on your own personal circumstances, relate to one or more of these. So the first one, and you'll have heard me mention this before, it won't come as any news, but big mistake I made this year is with spacing. So this is a really massive thing, and there's actually tons of information on the internet about it. It shouldn't be a mistake that I made. I just had a whole part of my brain that kept overriding what I was hearing and reading and seeing, saying you can't possibly plant anything that close together. And that's because the spacings when you're planting things for a cut flower farm are totally different to what you would do in a garden. Things need to go much, much closer together. And this is particularly the case if you're doing annuals. So the annuals really can be absolutely crammed in together. The only spacings that I got right this year were with my cornflowers, and I put them about 20 centimeters apart. And actually, they could have gone closer. They could have gone somewhere between 12 and a half and 15 centimeters apart. But that was the plant that I got the closest to being most accurate. Everything else was wildly off, and there were just enormous gaps everywhere. And it's really not helpful because I did lots of succession sowing this year, but it really doesn't matter because what I ended up with is just masses of space taken over with all of these successions when I could have fitted the whole lot into about a third of the space that I ended up taking up. And so it's a waste of space. You don't need to have that much soil exposed. You don't need all the plants to have that much space. And they're more likely to just fall over or lean into each other, and you're just wasting valuable growing space. So that's a really significant one for me. Obviously, in a garden, you would be spacing things in the most appropriate distance apart based on the plant's needs. But often, the guides that you have with plants anyway, they're not going to get to the size that it says perhaps on the label, or that the plant's eventual size is going to be for maybe 5 years. So you can afford to plant things closer together anyway, if you don't mind maybe moving them or dividing them or cutting them back in due course. But whatever you do for the cut flowers, everything needs to be so much closer together. Now, the second one is staking. And again, you've heard me talk about this a lot before because I made some pretty terrible mistakes this year with staking. Now, with the gardening, I call it invisible staking. I don't think I've come up with that name. I think I probably got it from somewhere else. But a few years ago, I visited a fantastic garden in Kent called Great Dixter. It's one of the best gardens in the world. It's famous, and it's absolutely a drop dead gorgeous garden. I cried when I got there, and I didn't want to leave. And it just had like this huge sort of emotional impact on me. And they do a lot of really incredible things there, and if you ever get the chance, you must go and visit it because it really is an incredible garden. And one of the techniques that they pioneer there is this kind of invisible staking, and they're really hot on that because they have enormous beds, really big herbaceous beds, and they have a lot of really tall plants that need some help. But what they do is they hide, well, for the vast majority, I mean, like practically everything, they will hide the stakes or the supports so that you just don't see them. They'll hide them within the structure of the plant. And I picked up that technique from them, and it's something that I've adopted in my garden or anywhere else that I've been doing gardening. And it's so that you just don't spend months looking at stakes and supports. And I don't care how nice they are. For me, I don't like seeing metal structures in the garden. I don't even think they get hidden properly by the plants most of the time. And for me, there's just nothing worse than seeing a tiny plant like a peony or phlox or something that's like 3 inches tall, and then you've got this massive metal structure that's like, I don't know, 70, 80 centimeters, and it has to wait ages for the plant to reach it. And it's just a very personal thing. And I don't care how nice and expensive and handmade and weathered and whatever they are, I just can't stand them. So I've done lots of staking where you just literally you cannot see the staking. And for me, that in the garden context, it works fine. Generally speaking, the gardens are sheltered, and you have time to create these structures that provide the support. You don't have that luxury with a cut flower garden farm. Like you don't have the time, and you don't want anything that is got to be individually handmade. I also handmade something for my cornflowers this year, which I was very, very proud of. And then they obviously had a massive growth spurt, and I couldn't replicate the structure. So, disaster. But the point is, when you do your staking, or when I do my staking next year for everything, I will be doing it before the plants put any growth on. And I will be doing it in a really robust, and it's going to be in an obvious fashion. I mean, I have a rule on the field that there's no plastic on the ground, and I stick to that. Like, that is a hill that I'm going to die on. No plastic on the ground whatsoever. And I was planning on using stock fence netting for support for the plants, but I don't think that's going to be a goer because I think they're going to need really, really substantial supports to go in to support the weight of it and to get the tensioning right, which is another issue. And it's also very expensive to buy. And now I've got these sort of 14, 15 meter long beds. It's really, I don't think, going to work for me on the budget that I have. So I'm looking into plastic netting, which is just, it makes me a little bit ill to say that, but that is what I'm going to have to do. And it's going to be something that I can put up and take down myself and not bankrupt me purchasing it. So, yeah, the invisible staking is not going to work for the cut flowers, and the aesthetics really don't matter either. It will, I mean, the flowers will all come up through the netting, but yeah, very, very different approach. Now, number 3 is cutting regularly, cutting flowers regularly. Now, this is something that I would deadhead normally in a garden, so that obviously you have more flowers coming and you have a second flush if they only flower once, but you would be doing a regular program of deadheading. What I have learnt this year with the cut flowers, which I didn't actually do myself, I have only recently read about it, is that apparently you are supposed to be cutting once or twice a week. And even if you don't have a market for the product, you compost it or give it away or use it yourself or whatever, but you cut regardless. Whatever is ready gets cut, and no flower heads get left on the plant. And I did make that mistake this year. I mean, I don't really know. Sometimes I don't know what I was thinking, but um, I do particularly remember this with regards to the helenium. I left the heads on for way too long, and then there started to be a bit of demand for it. And so I cut them. And then, of course, there's a bit of a wait for the second heads to come up. And totally unnecessary, because as soon as the first lot were done, I should have just deadheaded them. Not even deadheaded them, just cut them, harvested them, and done something with them. And I didn't. So this is something that I'm going to do a little bit more reading up on, about how often I should be cutting in the height of the summer. But that is a difference to what I would do in the garden. Now, in at number 4, I've got the diversity of plants needs to be greater, obviously, for a cut flower farm. And although some gardens, push the boat out a little bit and have grasses, like some people just won't have any types of grasses in their garden, which I think is a huge oversight, because I'm obsessed with grasses. I love them, I have them in my garden. I think they add so much to a garden, like movement and texture and lightness. And there are so many things I think they're absolutely fantastic for. And lots of people won't even have them, so they never get to experience the wonder that is having grasses in the garden. But if you were just having a normal garden, of course, you probably wouldn't be thinking about having so many different types of flower. And I don't mean varieties. I mean, like, the disc ones, the spike ones, the foliage, the fillers. You're just not going to have that requirement for all of that diversity of flower type. Whereas when you have the cut flower farm, I have learnt this year that you need to have so much of non-focals. I hadn't realized the extent to which I'd been prioritizing focals. And it's worked in the sense that my wedding and event florist has purchased what she wants, and she was very much into focals. But when I start selling myself directly to customers next year at the farmers market, I realize that I'm going to need at least 60 or 70% of every arrangement, every bouquet is going to be a non-focal. So I have to make sure that I am prepared for that. Now, in at number 5 is clearing out old beds when the plants are no longer productive. Now, this is something that I picked up from Lisa Mason Ziegler, who discussed this in one of her podcasts, and it hadn't even actually really occurred to me at all. Apparently, it is a thing, and I think I'm far too soft to actually do this, to be honest, because I've still got scabious in the field, and I haven't even had the heart to clear them away. I've just left them and they're still flowering and doing their thing, but they're obviously nowhere near as productive as they were back in July. So this is all about clearing out old beds completely, taking the whole crop out when they are no longer super productive. It's not a question of waiting until the very last the very last flower has been harvested. It's like, enough, clear the whole bed out and put something else in there. And that is something that I'm going to have to work on next year on the farm anyway. But in terms of a garden, that's not really a scenario that you would deal with particularly often. Like, obviously you would if you're changing out, tulips coming out of pots or containers by the house, and then you'd pull them out and put some summer bedding in, or put some perennials in, and then swap them again when you want to put the bulbs in. But generally speaking, you're not going to be clearing an entire border out unless you're doing some kind of stately home that's still doing the whole winter bedding, summer bedding thing, which is I'm not a fan of anyway. It's a very energy and efficient way of doing things, but uh, that still obviously happens. It is a thing, but that's the difference between a cut flower farm and a garden space. Now, in at number 6 is the whole disbudding thing, which is its official title. So important for cut flower growers, really not that important for gardeners. Um, Generally speaking, you would, you probably, I don't know, you might do a little bit of disbudding, but generally it's fine to just have all the stems, not being as long as you would require them. So the whole point of the disbudding is so that you end up with really tall stems and you don't have flowers at all different heights going up them, like for the dahlias, for example. So there is a technique, and I learnt it, and Richard Bailey, my mentor, taught it to me last year, and I did it this year, even though it kind of felt incredibly weird to remove all of these buds. Once I got my head around it and I saw the results, it worked fine. And then I've just done it all season and it's been brilliant. But it does feel weird if you haven't done it before. And don't even get me started on all of the stopping for chrysanthemums, because I would love to get into chrysanthemums and they absolutely frighten me to death. And I bought them last year and stopped them on exactly the day I was supposed to stop them. And the whole thing, just nothing flowered at all. I mean, it was just mental. So I don't even know what happened there. I have some out in the garden now. I don't even touch them. I don't lay a finger on them. No stopping, pinching, nothing. And they're flowering now, absolutely beautiful. And they're just absolutely prolific. So I think we're going to carry on perfecting the dahlias before I pick up another flower and try and sort out the whole chrysanthemum stopping business. But the disbudding is definitely a technique that you would use significantly more when you're doing cut flower growing than when you're gardening. And it's a mistake if you really don't, if I haven't really fully got a handle on it and not been brave enough to do what I know is the right technique. Now, in at number 7 is giving plants a chance when they're not performing very well. This is quite a tricky one, especially if you're gardening for other people and they have some kind of attachment to the plant and they're like, oh, well, let's just give it another year. Let's give it another year. Let's give it another try. That technique is not going to work in the cut flower farm. If things aren't performing, you need to cut your losses and get rid of them. I have not been strong enough to do that this year. I still have my tiny, spindly, hopeless little stocks that I have not had the heart to pull them out. I thought I'll just leave you guys in there. Maybe the stars will align and something will happen and you guys will do something. But that is a mistake that I have made, not being ruthless enough about things, taking up space. So I've got some pink anemones that have Japanese anemones that haven't flowered this year, haven't done anything, been hopeless, taken up valuable space. So I think it is a mistake to take the approach that I would normally do in a garden and say, oh yeah, we'll give it another year, it's fine. I can't do that on the cut flowers at all. I guess the only thing I could do is paint, maybe have a nursery bed, and things that aren't doing particularly well could go into the nursery bed, but that's only going to apply if they're perennials or shrubs. Like the annuals, just out and gone and composted and put something else in there. Number 8 is more of a practical one, really. It's understanding high traffic areas. And by that, I mean areas that you walk on constantly. So, paths in front of like the water bowsers, in front of sheds, in front of compost bins. There's so much more footfall on the cut flower farm than there is in a garden. And even when I've been looking after people's gardens, I've insisted that we put paving slabs down in front of greenhouses, in front of sheds, because you know that you're walking on that space all of the time and you just end up killing the grass and you make muddy patches, especially if you're on site 12 months of the year. And so it kind of pales into insignificance, really, with the amount of wear and tear there have been on the paths on the cut flower field this year. And I really did underestimate how much I would walk back and forth, and also take shortcuts, which I know that you always do. People do it all the time. You see it in parks where somebody's put a proper path in and people take no notice and they just cut the diagonal off and they'll walk across it regardless, even if it means they get muddy because they don't want to do that long extra bend. Same thing on the plot, really. I sort of created these paths, but again, it was all quite ad hoc as the site got bigger and bigger. And then I've ended up taking shortcuts as I've learnt where I really want to be walking. And those areas need to have some kind of layer down on them. So I put lots of bark down on mine, and then I've got slabs around all the water butts and everything, but not all of them. So that's something that needs to be done this winter now that I know where I walk most often. And you really want to make things as safe and easy and comfortable and accessible as possible. And if you have a plot on a slope like mine, you definitely need to make sure that you are as safe as possible. So I put a wheelbarrow down the other day, turned round to shut a gate, and it fell over, and all the contents of everything just fell out of the wheelbarrow. That's the sort of thing you just really don't want to be dealing with. So don't underestimate your high traffic areas and how they need some protection so that you can use them safely. Number 9, not writing things down. So this is probably, I think, not particularly important for me when I've been doing gardening. I did have one or two clients when I used to write down every single thing that I had done at every session, and it was great to look back on. But generally speaking, I don't write things down. But with the cut flowers, I have learnt that you can't really have enough data. So I have written an awful lot down this year, but I've realized I haven't had enough. And it's taken me to get to this point in the year to think, oh my goodness, why did I not write down X, Y, and Z? Why have I not counted every stem that I've cut from every plant instead of just the stems that I've sold? I have no idea what the actual yield was per square meter. And that was something that I identified quite early on in the season that I would need to know all this information. And some reason my brain said, oh, just count the ones that you sell rather than the ones that the total amount that you cut from either every plant or every bed or square meter, however you want to do it. And I think also so important to write down everything that I'm doing in terms of the time spent on this activity, time spent on that activity, what I did, when I did it. I really wish I'd written temperatures down as well. Now, I know a lot of this information is available retrospectively. You could probably ask the internet what was the temperature on this day, but I don't think it's going to be any substitute for me writing it down. So, what I'm going to do is buy myself one of those massive diaries where you have one page per day for the entire year. And I'm going to start from, I could start now. I was thinking psychologically start from January the 1st, but I could just go and buy one and start it now. Write down things like the temperature and what I did on that day, because it's all getting a little bit ad hoc at the moment. I've got things written down in notebooks and I'm pretty organized. I have a couple of books that I use, but then I'm also making notes on my phone because I find that I don't always have the notebooks on the plot with me. So I write things down on my phone and then you just write so many notes down. I mean, I probably make between 5 and 10 notes on something every single day. Of course, everything I did last week is now buried under something else. And I know there's all these search facilities and the phones are all very clever, but sometimes you just need to open a book and everything is written down. So this is a mistake that I have made this year that I am regretting not writing enough information, and I will do better next year. And the final thing, number 10, is not breaking the planning of things down in more granular detail for the cut flowers. I found that as a sort of legacy from the gardening, that you plan in a very seasonal way. So obviously, it's more fluid than four seasons per year these days, but you still essentially got your four big seasons, and you'll be planning for what you need in those seasons, and then you're planning 6 months, 1 year, 5 years ahead, so that you kind of replacing plants, and you're thinking about succession for large plants that are in the garden. But it's much more of a sort of overview, I guess. It's really not that granular. What I've learned this year, what's been a mistake, is not breaking things down in the cut flower farm in a much more nitty gritty fashion. And really, in high season, it's on a week by week basis. So it's planning not just successions, but really where you need to be in a week's time, and just having this kind of level of detail that you just I have never really required when I've been doing gardening. It's much more nuanced, and I think very, very important to be able to break all this down and to have schedules of what should be going on to make life easier, because when you're literally in the trenches, it's so difficult to have that more of an overview. You just sort of do what's in front of you. And I think having more of a really detailed, focused process that I can follow so I don't get distracted as well by other things. It's very easy to go on the plot and think, oh, I'll just go and deadhead that, I'll go and prune that, I'll go and move that, I'll go and do that. And I need to be very careful not to do that. Like, it's quite easy in a garden. You can just turn up for a job and go, oh, I need to trim that and I need to trim that, and it's fine. But on the cut flowers, like, there's too much going on to just turn up and have that sort of laissez-faire attitude. It's not working, and I feel like things are getting missed, even though I'm still gardening on a very small scale and I'm still year one. There are improvements to be made, and it's just silly to make mistakes that don't need to be made. So that is my list of the top 10, and I do hope you found it useful. You're probably sick and tired of me talking about spacing and staking, but they're so crucial. So that's me. There is now a weekend coming up, and lots and loads of work. And the very thing that I have just been talking about, of course, I don't have a schedule or a plan for this week. I should make one. I'm just going to go up there and put in the ground the things that I know are urgent. Like, planting stuff at the moment is the most important task, and everything else kind of has to wait. But getting paths and things sorted, that definitely needs doing, so that I don't trip over and kill myself this winter. So lots to do over the weekend. I hope you have a wonderful weekend wherever you are and whatever you're doing. And I very much hope that you will come back and join me for the next episode on Tuesday. So all the very best.